Hello everyone, this is part 19 of What If Naruto Was Abused and Leaves Konoha, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Naruto finished the last brushstroke over the seal in front of him. With a quick infusion of his own chakra, the seal glowed brightly and quickly dissolved before taking the one below it as well. At first he had underestimated the complexity of the seal he had been working on, nearly killing himself in the process. Luckily the rebels had a skilled medic on hand that prevented him from doing do. After that he had fixed his mistake and with some help from Mei he had successfully removed the seal from his own arm. However, unlike all the people he went on to help afterwards, he didn't completely remove the seal. He merely deactivated it. He did so because he found one aspect of the seal to be strange. Instead of nullifying his chakra completely like its counterpart in Hazuki-jo, it merely prevented a shinobi from using it. The chakra was still there, swirling beneath the surface like a dammed river. Naruto just couldn't mold it. If he used it for training purposes, then he could expand his own reserves while at the same time learning not to be so dependent of his chakra in case something like this happened again. Thanks, kid. The man he had been working on stood up and flexed his muscles to get some feeling back into them as chakra rushed through his system once again. Naruto was annoyed by the name everyone around here kept giving him, but he couldn't help but be happy at the relieved and thankful expression the people got when he removed their invisible bindings. He looked over at Mei expectantly, but the woman just shook her head. That was the last one, Naruto. You got rid of all the seals from the people we currently have in the base. I've sent word to our other outposts with the instructions you gave us, and people will get to work with them over there. She walked over, sitting on the chair that had previously been vacated by all of Naruto's patients. You have no idea how much you helped us, kid. With all those bloodlines in use again, we finally have some heavy hitters back, and it's going to take a while for Yagura to come up with a new seal. Fuinjutsu masters are rare throughout the elemental nations. Naruto just nodded, always happy to help. Before, his own Fuinjutsu expertise was just for himself. However, when he used it to actually help other people, he felt a rush from his core that he couldn't explain, but it felt good. He just smiled happily at the leader of the rebellion, who looked around in thought for a few moments. She also kept glancing at Naruto, peering at him as if there was something she was supposed to see but couldn't quite. Anyway, kid, you held up your side of the bargain, so now I'll hold up mine. She motioned for him to stand, and they walked through the underground base, passing lit torches and many of the rebels. A few were training, others were playing card games or shogi to pass the time, but all of them sent respectful nods towards Mei as she passed. Naruto even blushed slightly when he realized a few of the nods were in his direction. Respect wasn't something he was used to, and it unnerved him slightly. Don't worry, kid, the weight of leadership is a heavy burden, but when you help people you can't help but earn their respect. Naruto blushed again. Mei hadn't even turned when she talked, but she had obviously noticed the nods and respectful gazes as well. I'm not exactly the type to be respected. Mei just smirked as they carried on walking. The passages and tunnels of the compound were winding, and Naruto would have easily gotten lost if he didn't have a guide. Oh, and why is that? Naruto just hung his head a little, looking away from Mei so she wouldn't see the look over his face. It's nothing, I'm more used to fear and hatred than respect. So it feels weird. Mei stopped mid-step, turning to look at him curiously. Now why would a kid like you be feared or hated? You're not even old enough to have earned that kind of ire. Naruto just sneered in annoyance, thinking back over his childhood before reminding himself that was all behind him. Trust me, age has nothing to do with it. Without saying any more, Naruto kept walking, prompting Mei to follow on behind him, now rather curious about the blonde that had been brought to her. She led him into a large tactical room filled with plotting boards and maps, with a few people looking over them and discussing various strategies. Mei ignored him as she made her way over to one of the more expansive maps, filled with small models representing troop deployments and unit locations, as well as the defenses on certain areas. Alright, kid, if what you said is true, then your friend will more than likely have been taken here. She pointed to a small dot on the map out in the middle of nowhere, quite far behind what could be considered the enemy's lines. It's a large camp that's been lovingly dubbed Kuno Matsubi. Naruto shivered at the name. End of the line. didn't exactly sound very pleasant, and he understood the irony when considering who was kept there. We've been trying to launch a hit on the place for about a year now, but it's too far into Yagura's territory to take a sizable force. Sorry kid, but if you go there my men can't go with you. I can't even offer a few of my chunin, they'll be pretty much walking to their deaths. Naruto just nodded in understanding. He couldn't ask to rid this woman of some of her vital forces, and taking a junin would have been out of the question. Which is why I'll be going with you instead. Naruto just stared at her in shock, his eyes wide and unblinking at the offer. But why? Mei just smiled at Naruto warmly, not an expression he was used to from people in her generation. You still have no idea what you've done for us, kid. With that seal neutralized, we finally have a breath of a chance at winning this war. It's been dragging on for far too long, and my men have been mired down in it for even longer. If I go with you and we take out the camp, then we'll have struck a major victory over that bastard Yagura. She looked at him sternly, but her eyes still held warmth. You've paid not only me, but all the men who fight daily for their freedom a great debt, and I always repay my debts, no matter the cost. Naruto was still looking at her incredulously. But you're the leader here. If you don't make it back, what will happen to the rebellion? Mei smiled again, this time more out of pride. You'll learn someday, kid, that an idea is a lot stronger than the individual. It doesn't matter if I die out there, someone will just take my place. As long as there are still people willing to fight against bigotry and ignorance, there will be a rebellion. She smirked, looking down at him confidently. Anyway, don't you think I can handle myself? Naruto spluttered a bit, unsure of what to say that wouldn't dig him deeper into the pit he was making. Wisely he chose to say nothing and just looked at Mei expectantly. Good, then we should leave immediately. It's just turning dark, so we'll have all night to make it to Kuno Matsubi. Naruto just nodded in defeat. The woman made a strong argument, and if she was the leader of this rebellion, against a cage no less, then she must be strong. He sighed as she went over the plan to him, his sigh quickly turning into a smile at the thought of finally getting Fu back. Fu was growing increasingly bored as the large group of people slowly made their way through the dark forest. She had grown a taste for tree running in her time with Naruto, and being relegated back down to just walking through the forest at such a lethargic pace was irritating. She wished she had paid more attention when Naruto had excitedly gone on about Fuinjutsu, but to Fu it just looked like a load of squiggles on a page. That was, she could have gotten rid of those annoying seals and they could have already made it to where they were going. So where are we going anyway? Currently she was walking alongside the man who had told them he had a place they could go to. She had found out his name was Ao, and he was a part of the rebellion working against Yagura's regime. That alone had put him in Fu's good books after everything she had heard about the bloodline purge. He had gotten captured because his partner had betrayed him while they were on a two-man mission to free some of the very prisoners he now resided amongst. He had killed the man, but not before his accomplices managed to subdue him with the seal. There is a small base not too far from our location where we can regroup with the rebellion. After that we can make our way to Mei-sama's position and return to helping her, however we can. He sighed as he looked down at the seal around his bicep, the pain of losing his chakra obviously getting to him. Don't worry about that, if I can find my Onisan he can get rid of that seal, he's great with them. Ao still looked downcast, he obviously didn't find the words encouraging, that or he believed that Naruto was probably dead. He gave her a veiled smile to try and relieve the girl's worry before he went back to looking ahead and scouting out the path. For a while Fu had wanted to ask about the eye patch, the way he moved suggested he might have only recently lost the eye, or at least the vision in it. She decided against it, usually topics like that were a sore subject for most. She sighed again to herself, wondering where Naruto could be, banishing the nagging voice at the back of her mind telling her that he had abandoned her, left her like everybody else in her life. She didn't believe such things anymore. Naruto was family and family didn't abandon one another, so she wouldn't give up hope. Where are you, Onisan? Naruto stopped, coming to a low crouch on the branch he had hopped onto, quickly followed by Mei. He had to physically avert his eyes when he noticed the way her impressive bust bounced slightly when she jumped from tree to tree. She had caught him looking nice but said nothing, deciding to take it as a compliment. She wasn't sure if that made her vain or needy, but she didn't really care. In her opinion, Naruto looked like the type that would grow into an attractive young man, and to get that kind of unspoken compliment made her feel young. Plus he was being somewhat of a gentleman by trying not to look so she could forgive him. They stopped because they had come to the edge of a large clearing, at the center of which stood an equally large compound. It was surrounded on all sides by a chain-link fence, no doubt reinforced with chakra to prevent it from simply being crushed. This was Kuno Matsubi and it made Naruto's stomach churn just looking at it. Mainly it was composed of a few low buildings that formed one side of the compound and at the other stood a veritable sea of cages, all pressed up against one another. Currently Naruto was dressed up in a dark blue flak jacket with the standard camouflage pants of a Kirigakure shinobi. He might have been mistaken for one if it wasn't for his headband and bright blonde hair. If blonde hair was a rarity in Konoha and more so in Suna, then it was almost unheard of in the land of water. In fact, the only place that it was actually somewhat common was Kumogakure. Naruto had seen more than a few blondes in his time there. Other than that, he had only seen Tsunade and the Yamanakas to say otherwise. Focusing less on his possible heritage and more on the task at hand, Naruto made quick work in scouting out the encampment. There was a large contingent of guards, most likely between Junin and Chunin, constantly moving about the outer walls. Some even had nin dogs, and that would make it almost impossible to sneak up on the camp conventionally. Luckily, nothing Naruto ever did could be considered conventional, and he managed to see the glaring weakness in the camp's defense. Mai-sama, if you would let me, I believe I can disable the guard quickly enough and allow you entry into the compound. Mai just looked at him dumbfounded. He had already proven proficient in Fuinjutsu, an art that some men found impossible to even grasp the basics of, but even so he was only 15. She found it difficult to believe that he could have an easy way of getting into such a high-level compound that even Mai found slightly intimidating. What are you planning? Naruto just smirked, placing a finger against his nose in an "I'm not telling" manner. You'll see. With that he unsealed a few kunai, 3 in each hand, and Mai gasped as she recognized the design. She was about to comment when Naruto sent the special weapons sailing into the air on a trajectory that would take them over the walls of the camp, but not particularly in the direction of any of the guards. Naruto quickly formed a seal in his hands and whispered gently, "Multi-shadow kunai jutsu." Instantly the 6 thrown weapons sailing through the air became 60, each landing without even a whisper of a sound all throughout the base. Still stunned that such a young boy could know a technique like the Mai almost didn't notice when Naruto vanished from his spot on the branch besides her. Of course she did. One did not become leader of a rebellion without having that kind of awareness. Nothing could be heard from the direction of the encampment except the normal sounds of the nin dogs sniffing about outside the wall. Mai heard a strange whine as one of the dogs found the kunai and was scared by it because it didn't have any scent whatsoever. That whine turned into a brief but high-pitched yelp as the dog and its masters found themselves on the floor, bleeding from a gash on their necks and unable to cry out for help. Mai may have been around in the time of the Yondaime Hokage, but she hadn't ever seen his technique in use. Only Iwa and a few Kumo ninja had ever had the honor. Now she understood why it was so feared. The attack, if one could call it that, was over in a matter of minutes, with Naruto silently moving about the camp without having to take a single step, killing anybody that didn't have the suppression seal. Soon he stood in the center of the open area between the cages and the buildings, panting from the exertion of using the Fujin no Iki so much. The sharpened kunai in his hands were slowly dripping blood to the ground as he stared around at the death and destruction he had caused. Naruto had killed before, on his first mission to deal with some bandits in fact, but never on this scale. He managed to make it over to the main gates of the facility and open them before falling to the ground, just staring at his hands. Mai walked over almost hesitantly. She had seen some atrocities, as is only natural in a war, but seeing a young boy like that mercilessly slaughter an entire camp of shinobi was something she would ever forget. She looked at him, sat up against the chain-link fence of the camp, staring at the blood spatters on his hands like he could will them to vanish. She moved over to his side, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder as he forced him to look into her emerald eyes. Naruto, you did what you had to. He nodded slowly, almost mechanically, as if he wasn't fully registering what she was saying. At least he hadn't gone into shock, although worryingly that meant this was not his first kill. Mai had had her first kill at a much younger age, being raised in a war, but it still nearly broke her heart seeing the innocence of children like Naruto being slowly drained away as the sparkle left their eyes. He shakily stood up as his shocked and unbelieving features slowly morphed back into his usual determined mask. He quickly hurried back over to the cages and found they were all locked. Normally that would pose not problem as he could cut them open with wind jutsu, but he was exhausted from his use of the kunai. They were too sturdy to just be broken with brute force, but Mei was already on it. She walked up to one of the cages and breathed on the lock. A fine mist emerged from her lungs, and on contact with the lock it sizzled before completely melting away. Naruto looked on in surprise, wondering what kind of jutsu that was as she repeated the maneuver over and over until all of the cages were lock-free and they were stood before a small gathering of roughly 100 captured shinobi. A few seemed to recognize Mei and were giving their thanks for their rescue, but even more had seen what Naruto had done to the guards. Their faces were a mix between thanks, awe and respect, which continued to make Naruto feel uncomfortable. He didn't like that these people were thanking him for killing others. What they were doing may have been disgusting and horrible, but they were still people. It didn't really matter to Naruto. He was too busy looking through the faces of the crowd for that shock of mint green hair he wanted to see. He couldn't spot Fu anywhere and even tried calling out to her with no response. Mei just looked at his hopeful but frantic calling with a saddened look on her face. Casualties were a sad but necessary horror in war, and she had lived too long in battle to have hopes that Naruto's friend was even alive. Alright people, don't stand around gawking, we need to get you out of here quickly. Naruto snapped out of his discomfort long enough to tug on Mei's sleeve. Ho only turned around in annoyance. That may not be the best idea, Mei-sama. The older woman just looked at him curiously. We only managed to reach here because of our tree running. If we were to go by foot we would definitely get caught by all those patrols we came across unless one of us was to take him out beforehand. If even one of them got away we could be swarmed by Kiri troops. Mei thought about it and nodded quickly. You're right, but we also can't stay here. For all we know they have messengers coming to and fro to check up on the prisoners. We don't have enough time for you to remove all of these people's seals, so what do you suggest? Naruto just shrugged. I may not be able to get rid of all of them right now, but I could do enough that we would at least have a small squad. That way if we come across any patrols we have a better chance of getting rid of them before they can inform somebody else. Mei nodded at the young boy's suggestion. For a 15-year-old he was already showing incredible foresight and planning. I also need to find where my kunai landed. I don't want others getting their hands on them. Mei nodded in agreement. The last thing she wanted was Yagura getting his hands on such a dangerous technique. Speaking of which, kid, me and you are going to have a talk about what you did back there. Naruto just nodded dismissively. I could say the same thing. What was that technique you used to disable the locks? It wasn't any elemental transformation I've ever seen. Mei just smirked and held her finger up to her nose in the same manner Naruto had done minutes ago. We all have our secrets, Naruto. Naruto just scowled. He hated being left out of the loop or being denied information. Alright people, change of plans. I need those of you that have some kind of scouting or tracking ability, as well as those with a very powerful Kekkei Genkai to step forward, and Naruto here is going to remove that seal. We don't have time for all of you, but we'll get that done once we get back to our base. A few people came forward and Naruto made short work of their seal, having had plenty of practices back at Mei's base. Now alongside Mei and Naruto they had an ice wielder from the Yuki clan, a steel release user, someone with a strange dojutsu that made their eyes glow red when in use, and a storm release user. The unnamed dojutsu wielder took point with his ability to see through other objects and warned the others when a patrol was approaching. The steel release user would drop down in their midst, and when all their attacks failed on him the storm release user would use him as a lightning rod to take out the patrol. The Yuki clan member, Mei, and Naruto just acted as support, clearing up the stragglers that managed to get away. Naruto marveled at the Yuki clan member who said his name was Eki. His Kekkei Genkai was frightening in use. Naruto remembered Haku from his mission in Wave, and in comparison Haku might as well have been playing around with slush. Eki could harden the moisture in the air around his enemies, encasing them in ice without any prior notice before shattering both the cocoon and his prisoner with a flick of his wrist. It turns out the Yuki clan was one of the hardest hit in the bloodline purges because of the feared powers they wielded, and Naruto was beginning to see why. A squad of ice users could decimate a small army if they were near a source of water. The more experienced one like Eki just used the moisture in the air, and in water country there was a lot to say the least. With this team dynamic they actually made it back to the base in short time, leaving a trail of dead patrols in their wake with no survivors to tell Yagura what happened. The shocked look on the rebels' faces when a small army of bloodline users marched through their hallways. They were followed by a very happy Mei and a less than happy Naruto. He had failed to find Fu and she was still out there somewhere. He walked through the hallways, trailing after the group of freed prisoners with his head hanging low and a defeated look in his eyes. Well, he did until he was brought to the ground in a tight bear hug which crushed the air from his lungs. Onisen. Naruto somehow found himself on his back, lying on the cold stone floor staring into a pair of bright sparkling orange eyes. Fu. She dived forward again and wrapped Naruto into a large hug, something she could actually accomplish now thanks to a small growth spurt. Almost as if he didn't believe it was true, Naruto tentatively returned the hug, wrapping the smaller girl up into his arms. Finally they parted and Naruto could look at her properly. Her clothes were a little ragged and her wrists had red welts from where she had been bound, but most noticeable was the 2 large gashes in the back of her shirt which told Naruto she had used her wings. Fu. But how? So Fu told Naruto everything, of how she was captured, how she incited a small rebellion from the camp which brought a more smile to Naruto's face, and of how she came up with a plan to escape using her 2 signature abilities. In all, Naruto was very proud of his younger sister. She had grown up a lot in the last year, but until now Naruto didn't quite realize how much. When he looked at her he still saw the same little frightened girl he had found in Takagakure. However, now he could plainly see the intelligent, strong young woman she was becoming, and he felt a little pride when he realized it was partially because of him. She finally allowed him to get up off the floor when they heard Mei cough from where she was standing next to Eki. By now Ao had rushed into the room, having been chasing a curious Fu all throughout the complex, and was getting a curious look from Mei. Ao, I thought you were on a mission with Shisaku. He hung his head in shame a little. I'm sorry, Mei-sama. I was betrayed by Shisaku and handed over to the opposing forces. In fact, if it wasn't for that young girl I would still be under their control and no doubt have been in Matsubi or one of the other slave camps by now. Mei raised an eyebrow in Fu's direction, who just blushed under the scrutiny. Funny, because me and Naruto over there were just at Matsubi and now there is nobody there. The emphasis on the word told Ao everything that he needed to know about what had happened. He was a little shocked. That particular camp was infamous for being inescapable and no attack so far had been able to seize it. He looked at Naruto curiously, wondering what the boy was capable of but unable to truly examine him because of the seal around his arm. Is that right? Naruto just nodded, feeling strange under the searching eye of this man. Well then you have our thanks. With that amount of bloodline uses freed we will surely have an advantage in future conflicts. Naruto just blushed under the praise. It was still too foreign for him. Fu just seemed excited to hear that she wasn't the only one that had an adventure during their separation and bugged Naruto to tell her more about it as they walked back through the corridors of the base. Come on, Onisen, we have loads of time. Tell me about what you did. Naruto just smiled at her flustered features, enjoying having her back with him. Their time apart was too nerve-wracking and he promised himself from that point he would never let her get too far from him ever again until he was sure she could handle herself. Fu, I already told you. Mei-sama told me that was where you might be, so we went there to rescue you and all of the bloodline users that had been captured. Fu's eyes widened slightly as a single tear could be seen trying to escape their watery confines. You did all that just to rescue me. Even if you didn't know I was there for sure. Naruto just nodded, smiling softly as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Of course, Fu, I will never let anything bad happen to you as long as there is breath in my body. Fu smiled as well but returned to contemplation as she took in her brother's kindly words. Ah yes, if I may ask, how was it that a 15-year-old boy managed to infiltrate a high-level facility and rescue over 100 bloodline users without a single casualty? It was Ao who asked and Naruto just smirked, trying not to appear smug, but from the way he said it the accomplishment seemed even greater. He just unsealed one of his kunai and started swinging it by the ring around his finger. You know, a shinobi has to have secrets. Ao seemed to look at the tri-pronged kunai, then back at Naruto's face, then back at the weapon with incredible scrutiny. He didn't say anything else, but he did send a few questioning looks towards Mei, who simply sighed and shrugged exasperatedly. Anyway, let's do something about that seal around your arm. It must be getting annoying by now. Are you sure you have to move on? You would be a great help in this war. Mei seemed to rethink her words as she looked across at Naruto and Fu, an even greater help than you have already been. Naruto sadly shook his head, much to Mei's disappointment. I'm sorry, I have my own obligations and one of those is to train and become stronger. I couldn't do that in the middle of a civil war, I would be fighting too much. I also wouldn't want Fu to see some of the things that happen in a war, her innocence should be preserved as long as possible. Mei sadly nodded in agreement. After all, she had thought things along those lines when even thinking about Naruto. Fu was even younger. I understand, but it is still a great shame. Know that when we win this war you two will always be welcome in Kirigakure. Come by some time to see us. Naruto nodded with a smile, as did Fu. We owe you a debt for how you helped us and remember I always repay my debts. Naruto's smile broadened. They were just about to leave the rebel base having spent a week there. Naruto was busy with removing everybody's restriction seals and Fu even managed to make a few friends her age, most notable a young boy called Chojiro who, in Naruto's opinion, had some serious confidence issues. They both waved to the small gathering of rebel forces that had come to see him off and turned to leave when the passageway was sealed off by the earth moving to cover it. So where are we going now, Onisan? Naruto just chuckled heartily to himself. You know, Fu, I think I've decided to stop planning these things. It never works anyway. The single guard stationed outside of the Suna gate leaned against the passageway, only really keeping an idle eye on the desert horizon. There was nobody scheduled to even come to the village today, which was why he almost missed the two silhouettes approaching from the distance. Even then it took him a couple minutes just to realize they weren't mirages caused by the intense heat that left most foreigners dizzy. He peered closer, trying to discern anything he could from the general haze the desert's horizon held. Both figures were cloaked, one taller than the other, and he could spot blonde hair from the taller one. There was some kind of red pattern on the dark cloaks they wore, but it was too far away to make out. He alerted an Anbu he was sure would be watching with a few discreet hand signals and got the reply in the form of sunlight being reflected from a mirror in equally discreet pulses. His attention returned to the cloaked figures only to find himself staring at blonde hair. Hey Manny. The poor Chunin nearly jumped out of his skin and into the wall behind him, an unfortunate side effect of his surprise. And Naruto. He stuttered because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Manny knew Naruto when he was younger, having been assigned to catch him after one of his pranks. Back then the blonde had simply been a young kid, a talented ninja but still just a young kid of 12. Now the changes were startling, he had shot up in height, now approaching a respectable 5 foot and 10 inches. His normally shaggy hair had grown out into thinner and more pronounced spikes and his bangs now hung down to his chin, equally spiky as the hair on top. Well, at least you recognize me. When we went back to Kumo, Yugito nearly had a fit. He chuckled to himself, as did his smaller companion who Manny only now took notice of. She must have been about 13 or 14 with shoulder-length mint green hair that tried to be spiky like her mentor but didn't quite manage the same feat. The majority was held back by an orange hair clip that perfectly matched the startling color of her eyes. Her most notable feature was her caramel skin that made some of the tans in Sunagakure seem tame. Not as much as the rakage, he nearly passed out for some reason. Both laughed again at the memory of the normally unflappable of falling backward off his chair when Naruto had entered his office. Manny just stared at the two, wondering who the small girl was while at the same time wondering what they were talking about. Naruto. The blonde finally returned his attention to the Chunin with a smile. Hey Manny, long time no see. The gate guard just nodded dumbly, still slightly taken aback at the shocking change to Naruto's appearance. Yeah, 2 years. Naruto nodded with a melancholic smile. I hope things haven't been too quiet without me around. Manny just laughed, some of his surprise finally wearing off as he realized this was still the same Naruto after all. Not with Matsuri around, that's for sure. Naruto just stared at him blankly and Manny had to chuckle sheepishly. You'll see when you report to the Kazekage. Naruto just smiled brightly. Awesome, I wonder how much Gaara's changed. Manny just smiled politely and gave them the appropriate forms for them to fill out. Fu gasped as she took her first look at the inside of Suna's walls. Naruto had warned her that it was an impressive sight, but having been to both Kumo and Kirigakure she didn't think it could measure up. She was wrong. She looked just as awed as Naruto had felt the first time walking through the crowded and lively streets while Naruto just smiled at the nostalgia. They made quick process through the streets with both getting strange looks from the residents. Many peered at Naruto as they tried to figure out where they had seen the tall blonde before. Their faces were even more amusing when their eyes opened wide in realization, mainly because of the headband that he had made so recognizable over the years. Those that didn't recognize him instead looked at the amber-eyed one walking alongside him. Turning 13, she had just started to fill out her clothes in the ways guys noticed. Naruto had recently found himself having to play the role of the protective brother, much to Fu's mutual ire and appreciation. It wasn't that he was possessive or dominating over Fu's life in general. If he was, he wouldn't have let her become a kunoichi. Instead, he just felt an overwhelming desire to protect her from anything, be it S-ranked criminals from Akatsuki to lecherous looks from teenage boys who began to appreciate her budding womanliness. They quickly made it to the Kazekage tower, thoroughly shocking the receptionist behind the desk as she hesitantly buzzed them through into Gaara's office. Naruto had thought about making some grand entrance to try and surprise his stoic and immovable friend, but in the end he just walked through the door with a smile on his face and an arm wrapped around Fu's shoulders. In the end he was the one who received the shock as he walked in and saw two people he had missed with all his heart for over 2 years. Looks like I beat you home, shithead. Naruto was across the room in seconds, tackling Tayuya to the ground in possibly the biggest hug he had ever given anybody in his life, and that included Fu. Oof. Tayuya suddenly found herself on the floor looking up into a pair of familiar cerulean blue orbs that stared back at her with unconcealed happiness that made the last 2 years simply melt away with familiarity. Well, doesn't this just make me feel left out? Naruto craned his neck to look at Gaara, who was just smirking at the pair. He stood up sheepishly, hand on the back of his head, and helped Tayuya up to her feet with a strong hand. He took that time to look at her and couldn't have been more surprised. Like Fu, Tayuya had filled out, in all the ways that would make a man drool, including Naruto if he hadn't controlled himself. Her hair had grown out even more and now reached down to the small of her back, while that ever-present bang continued to drape down between her eyes. She now wore a red sleeveless shirt that displayed her midriff and lightly toned abs with a fishnet t-shirt underneath that reached down only slightly lower. Instead of the normal shinobi pant that she used to wear, she now proudly stood in a tight red skirt that reached down to her mid-thigh and even tighter black spandex shorts underneath. To finish the look, she wore black fingerless gloves with metal plates on the back and standard black shinobi sandals. By now Naruto had abandoned his cloak and Tayuya was eyeing him up in the same way. His whiskers had grown more pronounced with age, which matched his now slightly more angular face. He had lost his innocent, almost cherub-like features, but they were replaced by an actual handsome face. His eyes still sparkled with the same youth Tayuya had left him with when they parted, but now also contained a hardened edge, speaking of somebody who had seen conflict. He still wore the black shinobi pants, but to his now taller size, with the equally dark sandals on his feet. He also continued to wear a plain orange shirt that was no doubt reinforced with seals, but instead of his traditional green open jacket he wore a long flowing coat. It was a deep red with black flames licking the bottom, and when it flapped slightly in the breeze you could make out scrolls lining the inside, as well as more than a few seals. In all, it left Tayuya slightly speechless, and if both parties had to choose a single word to describe the other, it would be hot. Sorry, it's great to see you, Gaara. I hope being Kazekage hasn't been too strenuous. The stoic sand user just smirked. He too had changed over the years. Like Naruto, his face had gained a more angular quality and his hair contained thinner spikes. The black markings around his eyes had also thinned slightly, and Naruto wasn't sure if that was because of age or any growing relationship between him and Shukaku. I've found ways to keep it bearable. They all heard a chuckle come from the corner of the room and Naruto turned sharply. Is that all I am, a means of stemming off boredom? Naruto watched as the young woman who had spoken walked over to Gaara and surprised him by placing her arms around his waist almost lovingly before resting her chin on his shoulder. She had shoulder-length brown hair which clumped into spikes at the bottom and warm dark brown eyes. She wore a dark t-shirt that matched her skirt and equally dark tights that stretched past her knees. Her headband was wrapped around her neck and she bore 2 metal arm guards. Of course not, that's just a plus. Naruto raised his eyebrow at Gaara, actually taking part in a small bit of banter. It seemed it wasn't only his appearance that had changed. Naruto, this is Matsuri, my fiancé. If Naruto had been drinking, he was sure that the liquid would now be successfully sprayed across the room. Instead, his eyes just opened wide and elicited a small giggle from Matsuri with a deeper chuckle from Gaara. He remembered Matsuri from the year below them in the academy but had never had any extended interaction with her. It's nice to meet you, Matsuri. She giggled again and Tayuya just smirked. I know, right? I was shocked as well. Who knew Gaara had it in him? Naruto just nodded dumbly and Gaara was lucky that his sand armor prevented anyone from seeing his blush. Yes, well, now that the pleasantries are over, I believe Naruto has someone else we all need to meet. 4 sets of eyes all turned around to stare at Fu, who, until now, had been hiding behind Naruto. Despite being around him for so long, she was still incredibly shy when it came to meeting new people, especially when one of those people was the Kazekage and another was her brother's girlfriend. Everybody, this is Fu, the Jinchuriki of the 7 Tails, Chome. The mint-haired girl waved weakly but felt a bit relieved when all she received was warm smiles from everybody present. Fu, the smoking hot redhead there is Tayuya. Said girl immediately blushed and looked away from Naruto. And the stoic redhead there is the Kazekage of Sunagaku, Gaara no Subaku. She waved again, this time with a little more confidence. It's good to meet you, Fu. In all of Naruto's letters he has only spoken highly of his little sister. Fu wasn't sure what to say when being addressed by somebody as important as the Kazekage. She was the same with all her interactions with the Reikage, although she had been younger then. It's alright, Fu, you have no reason to feel intimidated. Naruto and I have been friends for over half my life now. Matsuri just let out a small giggle. Yeah, no reason to feel intimidated except that you control sand and we're in the middle of a desert. Gaara just looked at her with a tired smile while Fu looked at him with an awed expression she saved for things that truly impressed her. Was that really necessary, Matsuri? Now she'll. That's so cool. How do you control sand? Do you have a bloodline? How much can you control? What can you make it do? Can you lift a desert? Gaara's eyes widened slightly at the rush of questions, his fears apparently unfounded as he began to see Naruto's influence on the young girl. Fu, I already told you before, Gaara's abilities come from Shukaku. He's a Jinchuriki, like us. Fu blushed a little, although it was hard to tell from the color of her skin. Oh yeah, I forgot. Naruto just laughed and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder before returning his attention to the one he had really missed over the years. Hey Tayuya, long time no see. The redhead just scowled and stormed over. Naruto actually flinched because he thought he had done something wrong, only for Tayuya's lips to smack into his own. His eyes opened wide only for the briefest of seconds before they closed and he wrapped his arms around Tayuya's waist so his hands could rest squarely on her bum. Her tongue asked for entrance and he didn't deny it as they began a sparring match different from the normal shinobi. Everybody else in the room just watched on, astonished and trying to hold in their blushes at the very open display of affection. Fu was finding it very strange to see her brother in this way, even after sneaking out some of those pictures Tayuya had sent him and nearly passing out from shock. Finally the two remembered that people need air to live and parted, smiling and panting with a line of saliva managing to hold them together. Wow. Wow. Both just stared at one another, still with that same smile before Gaara cleared his throat loudly. Yes, well, reunions aside, Tayuya has already delivered her report, so would you mind telling me of what you accomplished on your training mission? Naruto just smirked deviously. I think it would be better to just show you. Plus, I want to make sure that Tayuya-chan really has been training. He was surprised when the redhead showed no irritation at him using the affectionate suffix. He hadn't even meant to, it just slipped out. Fine with me, shithead. I missed being able to beat on you for 2 years. Naruto just smiled. He was so looking forward to this. There was an almost serene air in the training ground as Naruto and Tayuya stared across at each other, both smirking. Gaara, Matsuri and Fu all stood off to one side, watching with anticipation for somebody to make the first move. Usually by now Naruto would have charged in. He was always better at coming up with plans on the fly than actual forethought. Gaara just smiled. It seemed he had managed to learn some patience with age. So Tayuya-chan, how much do you want me to hold back? Tayuya scowled but smirked lightly, very confident in her stance. Oh, I wouldn't hold back if you know what's good for you. In a millisecond she had her flute out and up to her lips, intending to finish this quickly and show him that much hadn't changed over time. What she wasn't expecting was for Naruto to have already covered the decent 50 feet between them and snatch the flute out of her hands before she even realized it was gone. You know you really shouldn't rely on your flute so much, Tayuya-chan. The redhead had a second to get over her shock at how fast Naruto moved. She hadn't even seen him use the Fujin no Iki. She couldn't believe that anybody was that fast naturally, it just wasn't physically possible. The only person she had heard of that even approached those speeds was the Reikage in his lightning release armor, and Naruto didn't have the swirling blue aura. She didn't give him the chance to get close again as she thrust her hand into the ground. Instantly cracks spread out, form her position in concentric rings before the earth cracked and shook, imploding from the inside. Naruto, who was in the process of moving towards her again, was thrown completely off balance as a piece of earth beneath him was uprooted. The problem with moving at the speeds he did was it was a painful landing if you tripped. Luckily he caught his bearings in time to land on his hands, right next to Tayuya. She tried to lash out with a swift kick, but when you fight Naruto your movements have to be more than swift. Still on his hands he dodged out of the way, returning the kick with a lightning-fast jab of his own. Tayuya tried to block, but his leg snaked under her arm and caught her neck. The next thing she knew his hands were around her feet and he was flipping her over to land painfully on her back. He smiled down at her with mirth that just irritated her. She smirked as well as Naruto began to see stars and slumped off her body. What? Tayuya calmly got to her feet and brushed the dirt off of her clothes while looking down at Naruto. You like it. You have those otonin to thank for it. Vibration is a powerful thing, and if you get just the right frequency there's nothing you can't do. She kicked Naruto hard in the stomach to show his defeat while thinking how disappointed she was that it was so easy. Her first mistake was underestimating Naruto, as she soon found out when the clone burst an explosion that would make an exploding tag seem meek. Tayuya was sent spinning through the air to land on her arm as she felt it crack painfully from the force. She let out a grunt and looked around, hoping to catch a glimpse of the real Naruto before he could take advantage of her vulnerability. Not seeing him, she quickly lit up her hand in a green chakra shroud and passed it over her injury, feeling the pain melt away as bones and muscles knitted themselves back together. Wow, medical jutsu. That's cool. Her eyes opened in shock as she spun around to see Naruto staring over her shoulder. She hadn't even noticed he was there. She lashed out with her foot, which Naruto calmly caught and threw back at her, launching her away from him. She flipped and landed gracefully on her feet, wasting no time in activating a seal on her wrist, the inspiration for which came from Naruto himself. A large metal bow staff burst into existence in a puff of smoke and was deftly caught in an expert grip. Naruto just did what he always did, sped in at a nearly invisible pace, figuring he would dodge any attack thrown at him. That was why his eyes lit up in surprise when he saw the blue lightning charge down the metal staff, and he reacted too slow before the pole struck him in the cheek. He was sent hurtling back with an impressive force to impact not in a tree, but through it. Lightning chakra infused through the staff to speed up its speed and hitting power. Tayuya just nodded with a happy smile from her position in the middle of the field. Naruto felt Kurama pull his dislocated jaw back into its socket, and he tested it once or twice to see if it was working. He stood up, this time smiling at the great fight he was getting from his girlfriend. Good thing you're not the only one with a lightning affinity. He focused as he concentrated on the flow of chakra through his body, manipulating it so that it rubbed together, creating the static required for all lightning jutsu. Instead of releasing it like he should have, he allowed it to build up, diverting it into his muscles when it became too great. He felt it crackle over his nerve endings, giving him a sort of euphoric high that always came with this technique. Finally he passed wind chakra to his tenketsu, letting it build up before he let it all go in one burst. Swift release. Naruto vanished. The dirt wasn't even kicked up to show that his foot had moved, it simply looked like he had popped out of existence. In the same moment Tayuya felt 3 sharp blows come from all sides before a leg below her kicked her up into the air and batted her around. Nobody could even see a blur. Tayuya just looked like she was bouncing around in thin air, and all the spectators minus Fu were very confused. What technique is Naruto using? Gaara turned to Fu, who was just smiling at the performance her Onisuna's putting on. It's called Swift Release. It's used by combining his lightning and wind affinities. He forced lightning chakra into his muscles like the lightning release armor of the Reikage, but not enough to give him the aura. Then he forces wind chakra out of his tenketsu to propel him in the direction he needs to go. I've never seen him use it so early in a fight before. Tayuya must be pretty good. Gaara just nodded. He had received an abridged version of her training and he agreed that she was good. Their attentions returned to the spar, where Naruto finally reappeared out of a blur, allowing Tayuya to drop to the ground, riddled with bruises and a few broken bones. Naruto stopped a short distance away, panting for breath, moving that fast made it difficult to breathe, not to mention the control and chakra required were astonishing. He looked over to Tayuya to see if it was over, yet only to see her stand back up confidently, the green chakra already doing its job of healing her body up. Now he knew how his opponents must feel when they saw his body miraculously heal from Kyuubi's chakra. It was actually a little annoying. That was a nice move, Naruto, but it's my turn now. She bit her thumb and flashed through a few hand seals too fast for Naruto to follow before slamming her hand down into the ground. Summoning Jutsu. A white cloud erupted from her hand, bathing her half of the training ground before dispersing to reveal a small army of falcons, hovering with their wings. Sound cage. Naruto didn't have too much time to react before the falcons flew over to him and surrounded him in a perfect circle. They all opened their beaks and cried out at a frequency that was too high for a normal human to hear, but perfect for Naruto. It came from all sides of him, forcing him to cover his ears from the pain of it. Tayuya watched on, confident that this would be her victory before Naruto stopped clutching his ears in pain and stood up, as if the falcons weren't even there. She just looked on in shock, wondering if she had managed to deafen him before he pointed to his ears and shouted. Chakra earplugs, they're designed to kick in at a certain volume so I don't get deafened, but I can activate them manually to block out your jutsu. He was shouting a little because he couldn't hear his own voice, and Tayuya scowled at the simple, yet obvious answer to her technique. Not wanting to give him any more time to recover, she rushed in, bow staff already trailing chakra and ready to use. Sounds of pain. She brought the staff around in a low swing, moving so fast that the lightning in the metal rod actually created a noise as it split the air in its path. Naruto dodged the strike and tried to return one of his own, but as he hit Tayuya in the shoulder, his hand simply phased right through her. However, any doubts that this wasn't a clone were shattered when she brought the staff around again and connected with the side of Naruto's leg. The lightning in the pole numbed the nerve ending when she struck, causing Naruto to briefly lose control of his leg, allowing the redhead to get off 3 more strikes before he could jump back. It was lucky he was so used to having powerful electricity running through his muscles, or he was sure he would be on the ground in spasms. As it was, he was forced to dodge clumsily as Kurama went about repairing the damaged nerves and fixing his ability to send signals where they needed to go. Tayuya didn't let up though, and whenever he dodged, she would be right there with another blow waiting to strike him. Her staff moved so quickly it left a trail of light arcing about behind her and continued to create a melody as it ripped through air molecules. Finally she let up, moving backwards as Naruto caught his breath and allowed the fox within him to heal the last of the damage. Damn shithead, you got pretty fast while you were away. Nobody's ever been able to dodge me for so long. Naruto just shrugged, hiding the fact that he still wasn't quite 100%. Sorry, but I'm going to finish this up now. Pain in stereo. She held out her hand in a familiar hand seal and instantly she was joined by a clone, one Naruto knew was just as real as she was. Both smirked as they brought up their staffs, both coated in lighting chakra and both looking ready to use it. Naruto suddenly found himself dodging from an assault on both sides as the clone and the original moved in perfect tandem. Every so often their staffs would bounce off one another, creating a flash as sparks were released, and they used the push to bring the poles around even faster. Naruto was hard pressed and soon he had to resort to swift release to prevent himself from being hit all. He forced the chakra where it needed to go and instantly the world around him slowed down. He could see the individual streak of lightning as they arced from their metal conductors and every breath that the two Tayuyas took. He dodged the next swing of her staff as if it were being swung by a child before launching at her with a lightning-fast fist to the gut. The low-motion Tayuya opened her eyes wide and began to shake, Naruto actually being able to see the blur that her body became as it tried to vibrate out of harm's way. It didn't work. Naruto was just too fast, and an instant later she was across the field, clutching her stomach before puffing into non-existence, signifying Naruto had chosen the wrong girl. As if to hammer that point home, the Tayuya behind him tried to nail him in the back of the head with a quick jab, but in the instant the metal touched his skin he was already moving, the lightning not even fast enough to reach him before he was standing where the clone had disappeared. Tayuya panted as Naruto returned to the realm of the visible, deactivating the tiring technique. Damn it, shithead, just stay still already. Naruto just smirked and raised an eyebrow questioningly. It wouldn't be a very good spar if I did that, would it? Tayuya just scowled and surprised Naruto by pulling out another flute from her pouch, obviously a replacement for if someone did exactly what Naruto had. Naruto quickly activated his earplugs before she could even put the metal to her lips, exactly what she was hoping for. She blew out a quick sequence of notes and all the falcons she had summoned, which Naruto had unfortunately forgotten about, swooped down on him from above. The blonde was assaulted with a hail of beaks and feathers as he lashed out without really looking, dispelling summons with every strike while at the same time trying to save his clothes from the sharp beaks and clothes. When he finally got them all, he tried to peer through the smoke they had created upon dispelling, only for Tayuya to burst out of it, bow staff ready to take Naruto's head off. He flipped back, narrowly avoiding the blow as it sailed on and impacted with the ground. He gulped at the large crater the single blow had formed, reminding himself not to be on the receiving end of one of those. They both had returned to the spots they had started in, panting and out of breath from all the techniques they had been throwing around. Naruto clutched his wrist, intent on finishing this before it got out of hand. Quickly a Rasengan the size of his head appeared in his hand, but he lowered its concentration so it wouldn't kill Tayuya if it hit. Come on shithead, you know I'm not going to let you get near enough to use that thing. Naruto just smiled. Then it's a good thing I learned how to do this. In a flash he thickened the chakra shell around the spinning orb and flung it towards Tayuya, smiling at the shock on her face as the condensed chakra flew through the air. It was connected to Naruto's hand still by a thin string of pulsing blue light, and faster than Tayuya could say, chakra thread, it smacked her straight in the stomach. All the condensed energy inside the sphere was finally released as the coating dissolved. The end result was Tayuya flying backwards from the shockwave it created. Naruto calmly waited for the impact zone to clear of smoke and dust. When it did, it revealed Tayuya shakily getting to her feet, staring at Naruto with defiance. Nice try shithead, but it's going to take more than that to put me down. Naruto just smiled innocently as he pulled on the chakra thread connected to his other hand. Tayuya followed it with her eyes right down to the spot near where she was standing as a seal suddenly revealed itself, along with 4 others all around her. Before she could utter another word, a bright purple barrier sprung up, completely sealing her into a prison of light. You were saying Tayuya-chan. Tayuya just pouted cutely, crossing her arms under her chest in frustration. No fair shithead. Naruto just grinned his foxy smile. I think that means I win. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.